조선 측으로부터 입국이 거부되셨습니다.
거부라니요?
조선 입국 거부자 명단에 이름이 있네요. 자, 다음이요.
저기요. 제가 왜 거부를 당해요? 저 조선인이에요.
다음이요.
저 조선인 이덕혜라고요.
자, 다음이요.
저기요.
네?
저기요.
뭐 하는 거예요?
왜 제가 거부를 당해요? 저기요.
She was the last princess of the Joseon Dynasty. For 20 long, painful years, she was forced to live in exile, a political hostage in Japan. When the war finally ended and Japan surrendered, she saw the dawn of her return. But her hope was met with a brutal betrayal. The homeland she had longed for mercilessly rejected her. At the port, her own country's soldiers dragged her like a criminal and threw her harshly to the ground. In her despair, a hand reached out. For a fleeting second, she thought it was help. But the face attached to that hand was the one she hated most in the world. The traitor who had orchestrated her exile in the first place. A fire of pure rage burned in her eyes. But before she could even act on it, she was shoved to the ground again. The man looked down at her, a triumphant, mocking sneer on his face, daring her to challenge him now that she had nothing left.
전에 제가 그러지 않았습니까? 옹주님께서는 절대 조선으로 들어갈 수 없다고.
Are you Mr. Han?
Yes, my name is Han.
Please, come this way.
Her story began in the early 20th century, as war tore the world apart. The Joseon Dynasty fell, becoming a protectorate of Japan. Her family, the royal family, were reduced to powerless puppets. Her own brother was sent to Japan as a boy, a royal hostage, never to see his father again. Desperate to save his beloved youngest daughter from the same fate, her father, the emperor, arranged a secret betrothal, Jang-han. The boy was a loyal young officer, chosen to be the princess's protector. But the plan to escape was discovered, and the emperor was silenced, poisoned by his captors. The young princess could only watch helplessly as her father died before her eyes. Years passed. The princess grew up, and she and her betrothed found small moments of innocent affection in a palace filled with shadows. But in a world of political turmoil, innocence is a luxury. A high-ranking pro-Japanese collaborator, Han Taek-soo, demanded she wear a kimono to a public event to show loyalty to her captors. But the princess refused, instead giving the clothes to her maid to wear. The message was clear. She would not be a puppet. That single act marked her as dangerous. The collaborator decided she needed to be broken. Using the princess's mother as leverage, he forced her to go study in Japan. It wasn't an education. It was an exile. A prison sentence without bars. Powerless, she was forced into the hated kimono. As she was about to leave, her mother handed her a thermos. It wasn't just a gift. It was a warning, whispered with fear. Trust no one. Drink nothing they give you, and never, ever forget who you are.
이 보온병을 늘 지니고 다니세요. 적국의 땅에서는 물 한 잔도 함부로 드시면 아니 됩니다.
Surrounded by the weeping of her loyal maids, the young princess walked out of the palace gates. This journey to a hostile land was filled with unknown dangers. No one knew if she would ever return. In Japan, not a single day passed that she didn't ache for her homeland. Years went by. Then, one day, she finally saw a familiar face from her past. It was her betrothed, the young officer from her childhood. He had graduated at the top of his class from the Japanese military academy and was now assigned to her exiled brother's staff. But this was all a cover for his real mission. He was a secret agent for the Korean independence movement, sent to bring her and her brother home. She didn't know this yet. All she saw was a piece of her lost childhood standing before her. Soon, the princess was secretly brought into the underground resistance. Here, she learned the horrifying truth hidden from the newspapers. Her people, brought to Japan as laborers, were being treated like slaves. Even the children were forced into brutal factory work, many losing their fingers to the heavy machinery. Fingers the Japanese guards would then cruelly collect to use in their games. Their cover was blown. The Japanese police were coming. As chaos erupted, he grabbed the princess and they escaped through the back. It was only then that she finally understood his true identity and his real reason for being in Japan. With his help, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. He helped her open a small school for the Korean children. He reconnected her with her aging mother, bringing letters and even records of traditional music so she could hear the sounds of her homeland. But her growing influence made her a threat. When the laborers began to riot, the collaborator, Han Taek-soo, saw an opportunity. He demanded the princess give a pro-Japanese speech to calm her people. In exchange, he offered her the one thing she craved most, a ticket back home. Her betrothed rushed to her side, begging her not to do it, not to betray everything they had fought for. But for the princess, this wasn't just about politics. It was about seeing her terminally ill mother one last time. On the day of the speech, she stood before a crowd of her cold, hungry, broken countrymen. She looked at the faces of the children with their maimed hands. She looked at the collaborator, waiting for his victory. And then, she put down the microphone. She took off her formal hat, and in a clear, defiant voice, she spoke to her people, not as a puppet, but as a princess of Joseon.
동포 여러분, 저는 조선의 옹주 이덕혜입니다.
안거나 조생고대
오늘 이 자리에 설 제 모습이 그리고 여러분을 위해 아무것도 해드릴 게 없는 제 자신이 무척 부끄럽고 죄스럽습니다. 얼마나 고되고 힘드십니까? 그러나 잊지 마십시오. 우리에겐 돌아갈 고향이 있습니다. 지금 이 순간에도 조선에서 우리를 애타게 기다리고 있는 우리 가족을 위해서라도 희망을 잃지 마십시오. 끝까지 포기하지 마십시오. 빼앗긴 들에도 봄은 옵니다.
Her words ignited a fire in the crowd. A wave of thunderous applause erupted, followed by the sound of a forbidden folk song rising from the hundreds of assembled laborers. The simmering unrest exploded into a full-blown riot. The young officer grabbed the princess, trying to get her to safety. But they were violently dragged from their car by the furious collaborator, Han Taek-soo. The princess's loyal maid, Bok-soon, desperately tried to protect her, and was beaten to the ground for her efforts. It was the officer who finally stopped the collaborators' rampage. That night, the princess talked with her maid. They may have been master and servant by title, but in this lonely exile, they were sisters, bound by a shared grief. Suddenly, the sound of shouting erupted from outside. It was the collaborator, back for his revenge. He wasn't targeting the princess directly. He was deporting Bok-soon, her only friend and ally. Bok-soon clung to the railings for dear life as soldiers tried to drag her away, refusing to let go even as they beat her until she was bloodied. The princess's heart shattered watching her friend be brutalized for her sake. Knowing she couldn't win, she did the only thing she could. She used her royal authority. As her princess, she commanded Bok-soon to go home. Before being taken away, Bok-soon broke free from the soldiers one last time, knelt before her mistress, and performed a deep, final bow of loyalty and love.
마마, 건강하소서.
그래. 어서 가거라. 내 약속하마. 조선으로 돌아가서 너를 꼭 다시 찾을 것이다.
Not long after, another piece of devastating news arrived. Her mother, her last direct link to home, had passed away. This final blow shattered what was left of her patience. Her grief hardened into a cold resolve. She would no longer be a pawn. She would be a weapon. She agreed to join the officer and his resistance cell in their most daring plan yet, a full-scale operation to escape to the provisional government in Shanghai and fight for their country's independence. But the collaborator, Han Taek-soo, stood in their way, so he became part of the plan. During an upcoming Japanese ceremony, a bomb would be used to eliminate him and a group of high-ranking military officials, creating a diversion for their escape. The collaborator unknowingly provided the perfect opportunity. He had arranged for the princess to be married off to a Japanese count. Her escape would happen during her wedding dress fitting. From there, she and her brother would be taken to a boat waiting at the shore. As the ceremony began, the young officer delivered the bomb to the Resistance's explosives expert, his heart pounding. At the peak of the celebration, as the officials stood proudly on stage, the expert broke through the crowd, pulled the pin, and with all his strength hurled the bomb toward the heart of the enemy. But Han Taek-soo was lucky and did not die. As the expert rushed forward to finish him off with a gun, Japanese soldiers shot him down. Before he died, he pulled the blood-stained national flag out of his clothes with all his strength. Realizing what was happening, he raced to the bridal shop, only to find the princess already gone. She was in the officer's getaway car, speeding through the streets. But the collaborator was in hot pursuit. In a decisive move, the officer drew his weapon and fired, wounding the traitor and buying them enough time to escape. At a secret safe house, as the princess tended to his wounds, the adrenaline of the fight faded. For the first time, in this brief moment of stillness, they were not a princess and her protector, but just two people, clinging to each other through a long and difficult night. It felt like they could almost see the dawn of victory. But that hope was extinguished the moment they opened the door. A barrage of gunfire forced them back inside. Their location had been compromised. They were surrounded. In the chaos, the officer made a split-second decision. He pointed her towards a hidden tunnel.
옹주님, 지금부터 혼자 움직이셔야 합니다. 이 통로를 따라 나가시면 숲길이 나올 겁니다. 그 숲길로 쭉 들어가면 해안가까지 이어져요. 해안가 적당한 곳에 몸을 숨기시고 배가 올 때까지 기다려주십시오.
싫어요. 혼자서는 못 가요. 같이 가요.
저는 쫓지 못하도록 처리하고 뒤따르겠습니다.
Following his orders, the princess ran through the windswept shore. Behind her, a massive explosion ripped through the wind as the officer's final trap detonated. The sound made her heart stop, a terrifying mix of victory and fear. Then, a light. The rescue boat appeared on the horizon. Overcome with relief, she began to wave frantically. And at that same moment, she saw a figure stumbling out of the woods towards her. It was him. He was alive. They ran towards each other, years of pain and longing about to finally end in a triumphant reunion. But as they got closer, the officer saw his friend on the boat. Frantically, secretly, waving him off, signaling a trap. It was too late. From the shadows of the boat, the collaborator, Han Taek-soo, emerged with a pistol. A shot rang out, hitting the officer in the leg. As he struggled to his feet, a second shot tore through his chest. He collapsed at the water's edge, his life uncertain. Watching the man who had fought a lifetime for her bleed out on the sand, the princess let out a scream of pure, unfiltered anguish. Her dream of returning home was gone. But worse, the one person who had been her anchor in a cruel world was now gone too. Defeated and heartbroken, the princess was forced to marry a Japanese count, an aristocrat named Takeyuki So. He was a kind man, and he loved her deeply, but it didn't matter. Her heart was already dead. She spent her days in a numb, silent haze, listening to the old records the officer had given her, mourning the man she lost and the homeland she couldn't reach. The birth of a daughter brought a brief flicker of light into her darkness, but it wouldn't last. In 1945, Japan surrendered. The war was over. Overjoyed, the princess rushed to the port with her daughter, ready to finally go home. But at the immigration desk, her request was denied. The new Korean government, fearing political instability, had refused entry to all members of the former royal family. Adding to the cruel irony, she watched as the collaborator, Han Taek-soo, a man who had sold out his own country, was welcomed back without issue. The last thread of hope that had kept her sane for decades finally snapped. She wasn't angry anymore. She simply lay on the ground and began to laugh, a wild, broken sound at the absurdity of her cursed life. From that day on, her mind shattered. She vanished from public life, a forgotten princess in a foreign land. But one man had not forgotten her. The officer, Jang-han, had survived. He'd been captured and sent to a labor camp, but was finally freed after the war. For years, he searched for her. In 1961, he found her in a Japanese mental hospital. She was a ghost of her former self, emaciated, her hair gray and tangled, a testament to decades of suffering. He tried to take her home, but was blocked again. She no longer had Korean citizenship, so he made one last, desperate stand. Now a journalist, he used a press conference between Korean and Japanese officials to publicly shame his own government, raising the forgotten issue of Korea's last princess. His tireless efforts finally worked. Her citizenship was restored. He returned to the hospital to bring her home. A nurse slowly helped a frail, trembling old woman walk towards him. In her hands, she clutched the thermos her mother had given her as a girl, a lifetime ago. At first, there was no recognition in her vacant eyes. She was lost to him, until he leaned in and whispered his name.
Jang-han이요. 뒤돌아보지 말고 앞만 보고 뛰십시오. 제가 반드시 옹주님을 다시 찾을 것입니다.
장경, 시간이 없어요. 어서 빨리 여기 탈출해야 한다니까.
예, 맞습니다. 여기서 탈출하는 겁니다. 이제는 고국으로 돌아가실 수 있습니다, 옹주님.
January 26th, 1962. After 37 years of forced exile, the last princess of Joseon finally set foot on her homeland again. As she was wheeled through the airport doors, a sudden blinding storm of camera flashes erupted from a massive crowd of journalists, and for a moment, the frail old woman was terrified. But then, a familiar, steady hand gently rested on her shoulder.
옹주님, 이제 고국에 오신 겁니다.
Looking past the flashing cameras, her eyes settled on a group of elderly women waiting patiently at the back of the crowd, their faces etched with the lines of time. It took her a moment to realize who they were. The palace maids from her youth, who had served her a lifetime ago, now kneeling on the ground to welcome their princess home. And among them, she saw a single, achingly familiar face. It was Bok-soon, her loyal friend, her sister in exile, now as old and frail as she was. She remembered a promise she had made to her friend in a moment of despair, so many years ago, that one day she would see her again. Now, finally, that promise was fulfilled. The wheels of history roll on relentlessly. Times had changed. Her country had changed. As she walked, falteringly towards the gates of her childhood palace, she was met not with an open door, but with a cold, impersonal barrier and a no-entry sign. Just then, a little girl in a colorful traditional dress ran past her, giggling with a joy so familiar, it was like watching a ghost of her own childhood. And in a daze, the barrier and the signs seemed to melt away. She looked up at the grand hall, and she saw them. Her father, the emperor, her gentle mother, both standing there, their faces filled with the same loving smiles she had memorized so long ago. She walked slowly, step by weary step, towards them. She walked back into her father's loving gaze. She walked back into her mother's warm embrace. For this old woman, whose entire life had been a story of wandering and loss, she had, in this one beautiful, final moment, found her way home. Tell the story with heart. Tell the story with sincerity. I'm Pixielow, journeying with you so we both may grow. See you in the next video.